And welcome, welcome, welcome. This is Peter Winnick. I'm the founder and CEO of Thought Leadership Leverage, and you're joining us on the podcast today, which is Leveraging Thought Leadership. Today, I'm excited to speak to my guest, who's Martin Rutte. Martin is a dynamic international speaker and consultant. He's the president of Livelihood, which is a management consulting firm in Santa Fe. Amongst other things, he is the co-author of the New York Times bestseller, Chicken Soup for the Soul at Work, which has sold over 1.1 million copies and has been translated into 24 languages. He's a world-renowned speaker. His work has appeared in the Times, the Miami Herald, Wall Street Journal. And here we are. Welcome aboard, Martin. Thanks for calling in today.
Thank you, Peter.
Great. So if we had more time, I would read your entire bio because the depth is pretty impressive.
Thank you.
So let's just dive in. I'll ask you sort of the easy question that might not be so easy. How the heck did you get here? And there's so many different things that you've done, all connected to content and thought leadership. But tell me, give me a summary of the journey, if you could.
I've been thinking about this lately. When I was a kid, I used to sit on the front porch of our house, and this thought popped into my mind that I'm here to change the world. And what was interesting to me as I look back on it was I was never like scared of that or upset by that or thought it was weird. It was just like, your name's Peter, my name's Martin. There's the thought. And as I look at the progression, university was counseling psych. I worked for the Canadian federal government in a group called Non-Medical Use of Drugs. That was to get people off drugs. And then I met this guy who was doing this course in Chicago on self-development, which I just thought was astounding. I'd never heard things like responsibility for your life in the world, commitment, setting goals beyond what you believe possible. And I went to Chicago, flew to Chicago, took his course and said, that's it. So I quit my job with the federal government, which was quite the deal because, you have your little, in those days, the green check every 2 weeks, into the entrepreneurial world. And he eventually trained me to lead the trainings. And then people said, will you come and talk about vision and breakthrough objectives in our company? And I went, oh, okay. I mean, I'd never done that before. Would you come and consult with us on our corporate vision? Sure, okay. I went to Harvard, spoke there 4 times, set up a company in Canada, and it was all about vision, Peter, because I was interested in the notion of how can I unlock this idea within you about the kind of life and world that you want. And that led to, I did a lot of work on spirituality and work. I was the first person that I know of to actually use that phrase. I set up a center at a business school in Eastern Canada, one of the first in the world on that. And then about 20, 25 years ago, I had this insight that I wanted to look at a new vision for the world. And this thought popped into my mind, oh, you mean heaven on earth? And my first reaction was, what? That's ridiculous. You can't do that.
Right.
Well, exactly. I mean, I was, what? And then I thought, but wait a minute. I can talk to you about hell on earth, can't I?
Right.
Why can't I talk to you about heaven on earth? Not to impose my particular view of what heaven on earth is on you, but rather to evoke what heaven on earth is from you. And so that's been the majority of my work, aside from consulting.
I want to go a half a step back because you,
Yep.
you you brushed over something pretty quickly that I think is important, which is around you're being one of the first to talk about spirituality in the workplace. So
Yeah.
I want to split the thought into two. Oftentimes, various authors, thought leaders, and content folks are the first at dot dot dot. Almost doesn't matter what that is.
Yes.
And there's good and bad in that in terms of to the personal impact on your business and all that. So I want to talk about sort of the struggle or the benefit or both of being sort of first to the game when it comes to any specific area of content. In your case, bringing spirituality to work, which today, by the way, the code word is mindfulness, and it's pretty much there. So mission accomplished. Congratulations. But tell us
Thank
what
you.
that's like.
By the way, mindfulness, I do not equate with it in the sense that it's a subset of it.
Yes.
But I spoke about spirituality at work. Yeah. So specifically, not again, not imposed, but evoked.
Yep. Yep.
There have been three major periods of my life. One was I remember wanting to talk about vision in the mid late 80s in Toronto, and everybody said you can't talk about that. but I wanted to. And the fact that everybody around, I still remember this image of my friends and wife around the kitchen table, dining room table, saying, "No, you can't do that," and me going, "Thank you." And that's what I needed to move forward on that. And then when spirituality in the workplace came in, again, everybody in Toronto, no, 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 you can't talk about this. You can't talk about this. And I remember going to LA and talking to Jack Canfield and some other folks there, all of whom said, go for it. And I realized that the issue was my fear of your reaction. And once I saw that that was the determining factor, I said, that's not going to determine the way I go. I want to explore this arena of spirituality work. And then when Heaven on Earth came up, it was the same thing. I just knew this is it. So what I learned was there's a truth that emerges within you
Mm-hmm.
that you need to, not need to, that is an offering that invites you.
Mm-hmm.
And what I've done generally in my life is follow those. And
Got it.
when I did not know the road after I said yes.
So I love the sort of the integrity that comes with that. Of if you want to do it, or you can say integrity, or maybe stubbornness, or a little bit of both, right?
Yes, no, that's good. It's both.
So, right. So, and they're fine, right? So, a little bit of integrity, a little bit of stubbornness, and you stayed the course.
Yes.
My question or my thinking is really around, okay, so that feels good from a sort of intrinsic, this is the message I want to say, this is the way I wanted to say it, I'm not going to compromise, et cetera, et cetera. Where I've seen people struggle with that a bit is not on that side of the house, but the other side of the house, where if you're burdened with both sort of forcing people to have a conversation around something they're not aware of or understanding or whatever, there's an educational component to that before you can help them get to the solution side. And I'm talking primarily in the context of bringing content into the business environment, right? So spirituality to work, I would make the presumption that earlier on in the journey, you would have to first convince people in the corporate arena, like, yes, let me tell you this is a thing. Let me tell you what it means. Let me tell you what the possible benefits, outcomes, et cetera, are to your employees, to your organization, et cetera. That whole part of the equation you're not getting paid for. Then you move to the solutions on how can I help you, and that's where I've seen people have a tough go at it for some period of time, and then the flywheel kicks in. Could you sort of comment on that?
Peter, that's really a brilliant and very experienced question. You've clearly been through this before. What drew,
Thank you.
yeah, what drove me was this was a truth that I wanted to explore and see where it led me. I was fortunate, gifted, thankful enough that I had other work that paid the bills while I did this. That's how I managed to do it.
So this didn't have to be it didn't have to be a bet the house, and sometimes what happens is the folks that come in on the second wave, not necessarily copying per se what you're doing, but sort of adding to the conversation, have an easier time, sort of getting in because someone like you's been a pioneer and sort of cut a path through the forest, if you will.
That's accurate. That's very accurate. And
Good.
and for me personally, I get
Okay.
bored at stage two. It's like, oh, this is not pioneering anymore. Let them do it. I like to be right at the
Yeah.
front of the boat. Yeah.
Well, so no, but it's funny. But a lot of people get bored at stage two. And by the way, stage two is the stage where if you stay there a long time, you can make a lot of money, right? Because now it's basically nurturing and it's harvesting the seeds that you've planted. But there are a lot of people that at that point they want to go on and sort of break new ground elsewhere. That's not uncommon. I would be remiss if, while having you as a guest, I didn't ask at least a question or two about Chicken Soup for the Soul at work and your experience working with Jack and what it's like to sell over 1 million copies of a book in 24 languages. So give us a nugget or two there, because I would kick myself later today if I said, oh my, I had Martin on, I didn't ask him the question. So anyway.
Thank you, Peter. Yeah, Jack and I go back way, 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 way back before he was, quote, Jack Canfield. So we have a very deep relationship. And how Chicken Soup for the Soul was born was this was in the days in the late mid 90s when companies were laying off people. Successful companies were laying off people because technology was coming in and work was being shipped offshore to
Yep.
the tigers in Asia. And I had never seen anything like that. And I came back to my wife and said, look, the companies that I'm working with are successful, but they're laying off people. People are dispirited, blah, blah, blah. I got to do something about it. This is making me crazy. And she said, why don't we do a chicken soup book? And I went, oh my God. So I phoned Jack and I said, Jackie, look, I got this idea, chicken soup for the soul of work, blah, blah, blah. He said, great, do it. And that was it. It was like one phone call. We agreed on the split. And I said to him, do you need a written agreement from me? He said, not from you. I said, I don't need one from you. And that's it. He and I do not have a written agreement.
Okay, so the secret of success for everybody listening is just call Jack, right? Is it that easy? No. So just and just do it on a hand, right? Is that all there is
That's
to it?
it.
Like, there's got to be more to it. So I
No,
love
there's
the,
nothing more.
so okay, that's
No,
it. So
no.
call Jack. We'll give out his
The
number at the
secret
end.
is, yes, his direct number. The secret is relationship. We had a very deep relationship of trust, and we knew who each other were. Yeah,
But if I push on that story more, clearly there's a pre-existing relationship based on mutual respect and
yeah,
trust, and you admired each other as thinkers and all those. So I get
yeah.
that. There's also macro factors in terms of sort of the mid 90s was the first wave of outsourcing. So it wasn't that people were getting laid off in a down economy, but the economy was good, and we could find someone to do what you do for a fraction of what you do at another part of the world. And
Correct.
there's some technology and stuff that allow that to happen. So that was sort of a new wave.
Yep.
But moving the chicken soup concept for the soul, which was always a straight to consumer individual place, to the workplace, so your macro timing was right. Give us a sense of some of the things that happened as a result of that, because just to put that in context, today the average business book sells, I think it's 2,800 copies, right? A successful business book, meaning top 15-20%, is anything north of 10,000. 500,000 is like runaway train Obama kind of book, but 1.1 million copies is, I think it's like chicken soup for the soul in the Bible today. So what did that mean? How did your life change as a result of being part of that?
Our initial printing, Peter, was 250,000.
Yeah, that,
And our sales are mid-tier with respect to chicken soup. We are not in the top tier of chicken soup sales. So just to give you an idea. How it changed was it gave me tremendous credibility. We have a chicken soup book. It opened all kinds of corporate doors for me and my co-authors to go in and speak. We would sell books before, I'd have people reading their book 2 weeks before we got there, which really got us into it. And I remember Jack saying to me once that, Marty, in addition to opening doors that you will know about, it will also open doors that you do not know about. And that has proved true.
give us an example of a door that you didn't know about, because if it leads to more speaking and more book sales, I get it. But what was a door that you didn't know about?
How the door was how easy it was to get a speaking gig if I just said, oh, I'm a co-author of Chicken Soup for the Soul at Work. The credibility that led with was, I mean, you didn't have to say anything else. It was, and I'd never experienced that. I don't have to sell myself. Martin Rutte, I'm speaker on blah, blah, blah. But now it was like, oh, Martin Rutte, co-author Chicken Soup, and bang, you're in.
That's fantastic. So as a result of that, you've now got momentum, and you're speaking all over the world, and invited to all kinds of cool things. How would you sort of connect that? Forget the financial success, but to the impact that you've been able to have based on having that as a big part of your brand and your work.
Peter, I think one of the major things that I learned out of this was when we came up with this idea of doing Chicken Soup storytelling sessions in workplaces, where I would come in, you would get the book 2 weeks in advance. People would read however much they wanted, but they then understood the notion of what a story was, and a story stores a value. And so I'd come in, do a couple of stories, and then I'd say, "Anybody here have a story they'd like to share?" And it was over. They would take the room over, because what they were doing was sharing their values through stories, and it was such a
Got it.
powerful thing. Then I would move it to, okay, so now let's look at the story of this organization. What part of the story works? We talk about that. What part of the story
Sure.
does not work? And how do you change a story? So that and
Interesting.
the idea being you change a story by declaration, by saying this is the new
Sure.
story. And that led to the work on the new work, which is Project Heaven on Earth.
Got it. So I want to ask you now. So if someone's listening now and they're at a place where you were in the mid 90s before you reached out to Jack, and had a concept that they wanted to launch, and let's assume Jack wasn't an option for them. What might you suggest they think about doing in order to get things off the ground?
What I've learned is that there's something about knowing what your purpose is or what your mission is or what for entrepreneurs is your service, your product, the new story that you want to, a social entrepreneur. When you know what that is and that takes you, then go with it because it will open just these incredible doors and happenstances. Like, here you and I doing this podcast. I never thought about that before, but you came to me. Now
Right.
people are starting to come to me. So there's something about setting a very clear and strong purpose and intention and mission, and then being light about its implementation because it goes in ways. I was thinking about this analogy earlier, like water running, a little rivulet of water running down a hill with rocks on it. It continues to go in the direction down, but the way it gets there is, twisty and turny, and that's what I've learned. And so that has allowed me to enjoy the journey more. And so when this idea of Project Heaven on Earth came up, and I thought, oh my God, you can't say heaven on earth. It was the same thing. I knew that I wanted to change the story of what it means to be a human and what it means to be humanity, to actually say, okay, folks, here's the name of our new story, if you choose, called We Are Actually Creating Heaven on Earth. That's a bold statement. I was skeptical initially,
Sure.
but what I've learned over these last 20, 30 years of doing this is it speaks to a resonance in the soul, Peter, very deep. People are upset with the current story, the current condition of the world, and want something very, very profound to step forward with. And so, Project Heaven on Earth, because if you look at it, it's not only the noun Project Heaven on Earth, but it's also Project Heaven on Earth. So this is our, these three questions that I've discovered to help people get in touch with what heaven on earth is, and the seven gateways, seven different ways of getting into heaven on earth that I've discovered by asking people over and over and over and over, what's heaven on earth for you? What's heaven on earth for you? What's heaven on earth for you? There are patterns.
So now that you're focused on the Project Heaven on Earth, what are the things that you're looking at that give you either confirmation or concern that it's working and it's resonating, and at least directionally it's starting to sort of, you're planting the seeds that you intend to plant?
Yes. And so, one of your questions in the show notes was, how is technology helping you? Well, in this particular case, two major ways. One is Google Alert. And if your listeners don't know, you can go to Google Alert and put in a phrase
Yep.
or your name, your company. So I put in heaven on earth, and I get a report every day from around the English speaking world about where heaven on earth is showing up. That allows me to connect with incredible people all over the world as this thought form, this meme comes in. The other way that I know that it's working, so I can see how this is increasing in numbers of people who don't know each other.
Right.
The second way I've learned is if you go to Google and put in the phrase in quotes "heaven on earth" and then 2018 outside the quote, you'll get about 8.5 million for last year, roughly. If you and I did this on July the 1st, halfway point of the year, in quotes, heaven on earth, end quote, 2019, I got 12.5 million. We are at 155% of the totality of last year, halfway through this year.
That's fantastic.
That's how I know it's working.
So that is a, there's a metric, right? And you've confirmed the metric, and there could be others, and maybe those are the right metrics, the wrong metrics, the best ones, whatever. But I love that you've got your own sort of tracking mechanism, which is a fairly macro one, to say, yeah, directionally, I know that something's happening
Correct.
here. So that's awesome. Well, as we start to wrap up here, any final thoughts or recommendation of someone that is in the thought leadership world, in the content world? Any do's or don'ts or words of wisdom? No pressure.
Look at what heaven on earth is for you for what you're doing, and then take a simple action. And I want to underline simple, easy, concrete action in the next 24 hours to move that forward. I think in the world right now, we need to operate in an entirely new domain, a new context, a new story. I'm inviting people to look at what heaven on earth is beyond what you even can believe it. Oh, that's the other piece of advice. I was speaking to somebody the other day. There's a belief, Peter, that in order to do something, you have to believe that you can do it.
Right.
The problem with that is then you'll only do what you believe is possible. But what if you wanted something like ending hunger? What if you wanted something like heaven on earth? What if you wanted something like a hundredfold increase over what your business did last year? And that's beyond what you believe possible. What you'll do is wait for the belief to come into play. No, begin. And the reason belief is not necessary, it's fine if it's there, but it's not necessary. Think of a time in your life when you did something after which you said, "Oh my God, I don't believe I did that."
Right.
For me, it was running in a marathon or seeing somebody do something equivalent. It's because belief isn't necessary.
That's fantastic.
So if it's not necessary, then you can wave your magic wand and say, okay, beyond or outside of what I believe possible, what do I want? That gets you into an entirely new, powerful domain.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much. I've enjoyed our conversation today and the one we had prior to the show. This has been a lot of great information here. Thank you so much for sharing your story with us.
Thank you, Peter. Great questions.
Thanks. To learn more about Thought Leadership Leverage, please visit our website at thoughtleadershipleverage.com. To reach me directly, feel free to email me at peter@thoughtleadershipleverage.com. And please subscribe to Leveraging Thought Leadership on iTunes or your favorite podcast app to get your weekly episode automatically.